Welcome to the Daily Records Hotline Live, brought to you by NordVPN. My name's Angus Hyde, and today we are joined by Ryan McDonald from the lovely warm Celtic Park. Ryan, how's tricks?
I'm absolutely bolted. I've been standing out here for 10 minutes. But yeah, it's definitely not a winter's. It's definitely not a summer's day here, that's for sure. But yeah, we're just spoken to Martin O'Neill, which is why we're outside Celtic Park here ahead of tomorrow's Champions League clash.
Yeah, of course, massive game for Celtic coming up. Ryan, yesterday we had the Hotline subs. Does that make us the Youth Academy prospects coming in here?
Well, I don't know. Take a wee look at the beard here. That probably tells you all you need to know. I think we're more, we're kind of impact players, aren't we, Angus?
I'm all right with that, big man. Stick the head in at the back post. So we've got teams all across Scotland going into European action. But of course, your Champions League tomorrow and LASK. Just gives a wee flavour of what Martin O'Neill's feeling like ahead of this massive clash for Celtic.
Yeah, so one of the first questions was, will there be any transfer business done ahead of tomorrow's playoff against LASK? And obviously Celtic have a 11 p.m. deadline tonight to register up to an additional 2 players. It looks unlikely, highly unlikely, that there's going to be any new signings in the door for them. Martin O'Neill pretty much quashed that one and says he's going to have to go with the squad that he has. Clearly, that's a bit of a blow for Celtic. They were in the market to sign a replacement for Arnie Engels, who moved on to West Ham Saturday night for £22 million. They're clearly going to miss a player of that profile, physique and running power in the middle of the park. They've also got Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain suspended, and I think that Oxlade-Chamberlain was pretty decent against Dundee United at Tannadice at the weekend, but that came as a bit of a surprise, from what I understand, to Celtic. So they're a bit light in midfield, and not signing that midfielder. It could, for Celtic's sake, I hope it doesn't prove costly, as some kind of transfer misgivings have in the past. So that's a bit of a blow. They never managed to get somebody over the line. Even if they did, it would be unlikely they would play tomorrow anyway. Probably looking more towards the second leg in Austria next week. But look, they're not going to sign MD, so it looks like this is the squad they're going to have to go with. And yeah, Martin O'Neill has a decision to make in the middle of the park. Obviously, Alistair Johnston's injured as well at right back, so you'd probably expect Colby Donovan to fill in there. So that's 2 key players that Celtic are without, but they're just going to have to make as best a go as possible. On Arnie Engels, the manager was asked about that, if he was disappointed to lose him ahead of this game, and he essentially said that the player wanted to leave. I think Arnie had looked at Alistair Johnston's situation. Alistair was wanted by Everton, and he's picked up an injury which is likely to rule him out for at least the next month. So, while Arnie Engels and Alistair Johnston were totally committed in the games that they played, I think it's quite clear that Arnie wasn't wanting to risk losing out in this probably maybe says a life-changing deal for him to go to West Ham. I know there's Celtic fans quite critical of the fact that he's moving to a championship club, but as I pointed out quite recently, that's the same path that Ryan Christie took. And look at him at Bournemouth. He's one of the most established midfielders in the Premier League just now. He's earning rave reviews through the year for Bournemouth, etc. So I think clearly Arnie Engels sees this as a path to the Premier League. West Ham will be the favourites to get promoted, and he'll hope to be there next season. But yeah, it's a life-changing deal for him. He'll be trebling his money, and it's quite understandable after seeing a move to Nottingham Forest rejected in January that he really wanted to pursue this. So clearly Martin O'Neill was disappointed to lose him for that, but they just, as I say, they just need to make deal with what they've got at the minute. And so that obviously as well, they'll be Celtic wanting to wipe away the scars of Carreta Almaty last year. Martin O'Neill was actually on punditry duties for Amazon. I think it was Amazon Prime for the game in Kazakhstan, and now he's in the dugout a year later. So it's funny how things work out. But yeah, it's a massive night for Celtic tomorrow night. It really can't be underestimated. It's the richest game in the club's history. I think there's up to about £40 million at stake, and after the calamity of last year, they'll clearly be wanting to bank that windfall this time around, because it's the last time that they're going to be they'll reach the Champions of Scotland will enter at this stage. Otherwise, I think from here on forward, it's going to be at least 3 qualifiers. So yeah, it's a must win for Celtic.
Yeah, of course, and obviously those Celtic teams that we've known over the last few years, the midfield has been such a big part of that, and Martin O'Neill won't be too happy having as late of the options that he has at the moment. So why don't we hear from him and his wee press conference that you were there at? Let's hear it.
How confident are you feeling in the way your squad is shaping up in the transfer window heading into these big fixtures?
Well, we are... I'm happy with the players that we brought into the football club, and that's good. And I'm just really looking forward to the game. The two ties coming up now are big matches for us, but they're also exceptionally difficult as well too. So we'll just be ready for the challenge, or at least we think we are. We
saw last season, I know you weren't here at the time, but we saw the detrimental impact it can have on a club not making it into the European competition that they want to. Quite a lot of players were there at the time. Can they take lessons from that and make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Well, I watched one of those games. In fact, I think I was doing some TV work on the second leg. And of course it became a major disappointment to not qualify for the Champions League is in itself that. But I think based on what happened the previous year, I think then it became like doubly disappointing not to make it. And but overall, I think that the players who are still here at the football club, I thought they may well remember it. They may well think that, listen, they've got something to try and achieve this time. But overall, I think we're just we're trying to look forward to the games, trying to get a result in the matches and try and get through.
There had been a thought process, certainly externally, leading into those games against Kairat, that not enough had been done in the transfer window to help supplement the squad to get them into a position where they could get into the Champions League. Are you very comfortable with the business that's been done with your squad over the last few weeks and feel that you have done enough to do so?
I like the players that we have signed. I think I said last weekend that ideally it would be nice if for instance, Hassan had a little bit more football played. That's the nature of the game. We've got him in now, and over the course of the season, whether it's in the Champions League or whether it's in the Europa League, it's up to the players now as much as anything else. I think the quality we brought in will bear fruit during the course of the season.
I don't think we've spoken to you since Arne Engels officially departed the club. Is it a disappointment that he's left at this stage of the summer transfer window where you have two massive European games coming up and you won't have him available for them?
Of course it is, yeah. I think that Arne wanted to go. He didn't want to play in the matches in case he got injured. I think I said again last week that was understandable if this is a move that he wanted to make. But for the football club, yeah, disappointing really, because just at this moment, he's hard to replace in the side, that sort of running power that he has and that he gives us. So just even for these two games, that's disappointing. It is what it is, and it's nothing we can do about it.
I know there's only a few hours left before the registration deadline, but is there any chance of adding to the squad further before this first leg?
What time is the final thing? Is it about
It's 11 o'clock tonight.
Is it? Well, I wouldn't really be sure. A fairly decent chance there'd be nothing happening.
What stage are you at just now in terms of trying to find a replacement for Arne Engels in the Celtic Park?
Yeah, well, I think that we are. We're still in the process of trying to do that, and it's we haven't been able to get someone in time to do that. But there are a number of players that we are looking at, and hopefully we will be by the end of the transfer window.
There we go, Martin O'Neill echoing those disappointments. Really looking at that, have Celtic done enough in this transfer window to give themselves a chance now? Because the stakes are high.
I think they were powder puff throughout the entirety of last season. They're relying on a out of sorts Dyson Maeda for much of the campaign before he exploded into life in the final weeks. And what a run of form he had, 9 goals in his last 7 games. But I think, before that, they were relying on a unfit Kelechi Iheanacho, Johnny Kenny at times. And they were just a bit of a mismatch up front. They've obviously spent a lot of money. They've shattered their transfer record in Casper who has already become a massive fan's favourite. He's made such a difference. I think he's lifted the entire club, never mind the team. You see that his link-up play with Benjamin Nygren. I don't think it's any coincidence that Nygren is now playing his best football of his Celtic career so far. He's been outstanding. A lot of criticism towards Nygren was, can he to flip the old add goals to his game cliche. A lot of people were saying, can he add games to his goals, because he used to for much of last season he filtered in and out of the game. But I think, look at his stats so far this season. 6 goal contributions in 3 games, which is outstanding. Again, I think having a recognised striker like Casper Hu up front has made that difference, because you can see that there's neat link-up play there. Then you've Camilo Duran, who's naturally a striker, a centre forward, but he's adaptable to playing out wide. And again, after a kind of fairly flat competitive debut against Dundee, he's really came alive against Kilmarnock, and obviously he opened his goal account at Dundee United at the weekend. So I think those two in particular have hit the ground running. The big question is over Mika Bauer, whether he starts tomorrow night in midfield. For me, I think he's got to. He spent £6.8 million in a midfielder. He's had a decent pre-season under his belt. He's played friendlies. He obviously made his debut off the bench at Tannadice at the weekend as well. I think with Celtic having so many limited options now in the midfield in the Centre Park, then he's got to come in. The other option is between probably him, Luke McCowan or Rio Hatate. Luke McCowan, he's been a bit of a squad player since he's arrived at the club a couple of seasons ago. He made his mark in Europe, to be fair, last year. He scored the winning goal in Germany against Stuttgart, albeit Celtic crashed out of Europa League. But that goal was the first win that Celtic had secured, the first win Celtic ever had in German soil. So he's proven that he can make an impact. And then there's Rio Hatate, who, for his first two years at Celtic, he was probably the best midfielder in Scotland, but he's just completely fallen away. What do you expect is the next
kind of moves for Hatate going forward?
Yeah. Obviously we've reported that there's been clubs interested in him in the MLS and other leagues in Europe, but he's rejected them, and he really fancies himself for a top 5 league. So that's clearly what he's holding out for, based on his level of performances, his consistency levels over the last 2 seasons. I doubt if he's going to land that. If he does, it'll be maybe to a League One team fighting at the bottom end of the table. But clearly he's got ambitions to follow in the path of Kyogo and Daizen Maeda and try and play at the highest level possible. But it just looks as if he's lost his groove at Celtic, he's lost his motivation, and to me, I don't really think you can rely on Rio Hatate to start tomorrow night, possibly making an impact from the bench. But I think it'll be, I think Mika Bauer's the man that's going to get an order alongside Callum McGregor and Benjamin Nygren.
Yeah, of course, and Celtic putting in a thumping performance at the weekend in the League Cup. Dundee United facing the woodwork many times in that
5
match.
times.
Yeah, of course. And looking at that, we saw the debut of Bauer and Hassan. Bauer looks okay, but Hassan looked a wee bit off the mark coming straight in. We're talking about how who's kind of lifted the Celtic support. And obviously the board are getting a bit less stick as a result of that. But do you think the timing of that is an issue? Is that them kind of falling into their own demons, as well as just not having enough at the right time, not giving them the time to settle into this Celtic squad?
Yeah, I think clearly in an ideal world, Celtic and any manager in football would want the majority of their signings in the door for the start of pre-season. Unfortunately, that's not worked out for Celtic. Obviously, they've changed their transfer strategy this summer. In the past, we've seen guys like, even last summer, we've seen guys like Shin Yamada and Hayato Inamura, who, by the way, didn't even make the Champions League squad this time last year for the playoff. Just players that Brendan Rodgers didn't rate, but they were brought in as project signings, and already they're out the door. Jemai Simpson-Busey is another one. So I think they've swerved away from that strategy, and they're clearly focusing on quality over quantity. And judging by the signings and the level of money that they've invested, clearly, the signings on paper that they brought in, we've seen Duran, we've seen Hu, they've clearly made an impact so far. But on paper, we can't really judge Bauer or Hassan, but on paper, those guys look the real deal as well. So these deals take time to negotiate. As we saw with Bauer, it took 3 weeks to get that one over the line. And yeah, it's clearly unfortunate that Celtic haven't managed to do more business before tonight's deadline, especially losing Arnie Engels so close to it. And yeah, I think that's probably the real kind of fear for Celtic fans, is the fact that they haven't replaced such an influential and key player like Engels in the middle of the park, because they don't have anybody like that. They don't have anybody with the physique and the profile and the running power that Engels has. They're all very much like for like. I've seen Mika Bauer compared to as or labelled the German Hatate. A dynamic player, decent passing range. I think he's capable of a couple of goals as well. But you don't really have that powerhouse in midfield, that real physical specimen. And I think that's what Celtic could lack, or will lack at the European level, unless they get a replacement. And look, it's not going to happen. So you need to draw a line under it, and Martin O'Neill will just go. He needs to deal with the card that he's been dealt. And Celtic should still have enough quality in the building to get this job done, because, as I said, there cannot be a repeat of last season's disaster against Kerry at Almaty. That really was an open goal, and they failed to prepare for that. They didn't get enough quality signings in the door for that. This time, at least they have a prolific striker in Casper, who, even a prolific versatile attacker in Camilo Duran, who, by the way, combined the pair of them scored 11 goals in the Champions League proper last season. So that's the type of calibre of signings that Celtic fans have been craving, and you've just got to fans will be pinning their hopes now on those two making an impact.
Massive upgrade on an Asian Kelechi Iheanacho, don't you think? I think when you look at this Celtic squad, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done with that. Win, lose or draw tomorrow. What can we see going forward? What additions? Is there anything in the movement?
Yeah, they're obviously looking to bolster various areas of the park. I think they're definitely in the market for another goalkeeper, a left back as well. I think you're looking probably at two central midfielders at least coming in. I think that's a necessity. You've lost Paulo Bernardo as well, people forget. So you've lost a wee bit of kind of strength and depth in the middle of the park. And you look at the run of fixtures that are on the horizon in September. Angus, I think the Celtic can end up cramming in over the course of the next month before the international break. I think across all 4 competitions, they can potentially have 9 games. So they're going to be playing, every midweek up until the international break. So they need a squad capable of competing, and Martin O'Neill needs to be able to, hang his hat on different and rotating his players and, giving fringe players a chance in coming in. So Celtic clearly need strength and depth if they're going to compete against all 4 fronts this season. And that's why I think, you're looking probably at least another four players coming in. And, there could be a couple of outgoings as well. We've just spoken about Rio Hatate. His future looks destined to be elsewhere. Johnny Kenny, I know that the manager's had a chat with Johnny Kenny, but he's not featured in any of the matchday squad so far. And might see some movement in that front towards the end of the window, maybe even on loan. I know that Bolton Wanderers are keen to have him back, so there could be a couple of outgoings as well. But yeah, Celtic have just got to hope they get through this qualifier, they bag the £40 million, and they can reinvest it on more quality additions to really tool up for the Champions League proper, the league phase. But the thing is, there's been a joyful mood around Celtic Park, around this neck of the woods over the last few weeks, because of the quality and calibre and pedigree of signings that have come in. But we all know, Angus, that mood can quickly change. We saw it last season, how toxic it went. There was a dark cloud that hung over Celtic Park for vast majority of the season. And, I think it's crucial. I think Michael Nicholson, the board, and Martin O'Neill will have their fingers crossed that doesn't happen again this season. But as I say, I think Celtic are still, despite not getting that midfielder, and I think they've still got enough quality in the building to progress past LASK, who, by the way, are no mugs. They're the best team in Austria. They've obviously they beat the likes of RB Salzburg, who have got plenty of money behind them, to the title. Sturm Graz as well, who battered Hearts 6-0 over 2 legs in aggregate. So they're no mugs, and they're going to be a tricky opponent for Celtic, especially over in Austria next week. It's unfortunate that Celtic, as a seeded team, they're not really handing the luck of the draw, because they are going to be obviously playing the first leg at home and the decisive second leg away from home. So that's counting against them. But it's just proves there's even more of an onus on Celtic to get a result tomorrow night. And I think, if they can get a 2-goal lead, that would put them in a real strong position. But I think Martindale would settle just for getting a win. And we'll see how they approach next week, which myself and Mick Cameron will be there in Austria to bring you the latest from.
Of course, mate. And before I let you go, I know you've got another press conference to run away to. But can Celtic do it? Can Celtic do it tomorrow night? All things considered.
Yeah, as I say, I fancy them. I was asked for my predictions on Record Sport, it'll be in tomorrow's paper, and it's online. And I went for 3-1 Celtic. I feel, as I say, they've got goal scorers up front now. They've got difference makers. They've got game changers, which they severely lacked last season. My only issue is, as I say, in the middle of the park, I worry about the strength that they've got in there. Also, watching Celtic this season, I know they've been pretty, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty have been pretty solid defensively, but you mentioned how many times Dundee United rattled the woodwork at Tannadice, 5 times, which is, I think, is just one short of equaling a world record, which was Germany against Kazakhstan in a World Cup qualifier in 2013. So that shows you that Celtic are making far too many chances, and to me, I think they need to be a lot more resolute from the middle of from defence to the middle of the park. I think there's a bit of a breakdown there at the minute. As I say, they're leaking too many chances, and that would be a concern. Even at Kilmarnock, Celtic battered Kilmarnock 5-1 at Rugby Park the other weekend, and at 1-0, Kilmarnock could have easily scored an equaliser, or scored a couple of goals before Celtic eventually put the game to bed. And Casper Hull, obviously, who went on to that with a hat-trick, and Celtic ran out convincing winners. But I think against a higher calibre opposition like LASK, they can't afford to give up so many chances, otherwise they will be punished. So that's why I do think they will concede tomorrow night, but I fancy them to get the job done and put themselves in a commanding position going over to Linz next week. Well, we'll have to wait and see, but I'll let you jump off and get to the press conference, mate. Thank you so much for joining us. Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks very much, Angus. Catch you later on. Cheers, big man. So, looking forward, obviously Celtic not the only ones in European action across the city. Rangers, obviously after their disappointing results, have dropped down into the Conference League, where they'll face up against the Czech side Jablonec. I caught up with Andy Newport and we talked all about it, looking at how Rangers are going to set up, looking forward, and also looking at transfers. I'm joined by Record Sports' Andy Newport. Andy, how you doing, mate?
No bad, Angus. No bad at all, pal.
Well, it's been a week of highs and lows for Rangers. Just give me your reflection on that. Lots of ups and downs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite been the start to life at Ibrox that Derek McInnes had envisioned when he took over. Obviously, so much excitement, so much optimism in the summer, but it's obviously been sort of wiped away by those first 4 games of the season where Rangers just simply weren't at it. Real lack of quality, especially in the final third, has badly let him down, let the team down, let the fans down. So, it's been a difficult couple of weeks. Obviously, Sunday's performance against St Mirren has helped lift the mood a wee bit. Probably at last give a sort of glimpse of the kind of football that Derek McInnes wants to play. It was certainly a lot better on Sunday, but listen, it's one game. There's a long way to go before Rangers fans can start getting any sort of level of proper excitement about this team. The hope will be that this is the one sort of result that provides a bit of a spark, provides some momentum to get them back going. But as you say, I mean, like, they're already lost a place in the Europa League after that result against the Jagiellonia Bialystok. They're already 5 points behind Celtic in the title race. So, listen, there's a lot of work for Rangers to do on the pitch, still a lot of work for Rangers to do off it in terms of recruitment. Andrew Kavanagh, speaking last week at the shareholder meeting, was talking about 5 new players coming in. Obviously, they've already brought in James Penrice, the lad for Aston Villa. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that name quite yet. He looks like a deal for that one.
Costa Nedeljkovic.
There you go. So I'll leave it to you to that one. That one's exclusively revealed by our colleague Scott McDermott a couple of weeks ago. So it looks like that one's going to be going ahead. Still, obviously, a couple of slots further up the pitch that need to be filled. Kevin Kelsey, I think it is, at Portland Timbers. Looks like there's still some serious interest there. Crozier Dewberry at Brighton reports last night that Rangers had a £7 million bid for the Brighton winger turned down. Not really surprised by that, given Tony Bloom's involvement. But listen, Rangers are desperate to get some more quality added at the top end of the pitch. It's badly needed, obviously. They missed out on Drioch last week from PSV. Interested to see him back training with PSV today. Maybe goes against the perceived wisdom that he might be looking at a lengthy layoff, but obviously the injury to Yusuf Chermiti has left a huge gaping hole at the top end of the pitch. So they really need to get moving on with those signings. But listen, for Derek McInnes, it'll be a huge relief from the weekend that he was able to finally get that first one as Rangers manager. Of course, and looking at the signings aspect, big win in League Cup. What did you make of the new faces? Obviously, Dragicevic scored an absolute stunner. Yeah. I mean, it was, what a hit from the lad. I mean, he couldn't have struck it any sweeter. Sure, he'd be slightly disappointed he was at fault for the goal that allowed St Mirren to get back in at 2-1. But it was the first time we'd seen him sort of in that midfield slot. He'd come in a few times off the bench when Rangers were chasing the result. And his only previous start had been that defeat to Hibs when he started at right back. So this was the first time we've seen him in his preferred holding, that preferred central midfield slot, and he looked impressive. He gets after our opponents. He's certainly tenacious in the tackle. He's got a good range of passing, as you can see. He can certainly strike a ball. I think there's maybe a wee bit of over eagerness with him at times. I think you saw that in the Hibs game when he was playing at right back. He was just a bit too keen to get involved in stuff at times, diving into challenges, perhaps losing his positioning. I think that can be coached out of him, though. I think that's definitely something that Derek McInnes will want to get hold of him and just, appeal to him to sort of calm down and just to sort of hold his tactical positioning a wee bit better. But I think in terms of first impression, really, really positive. And obviously James Penrice coming into the team as well at left back. I think. If you're looking at a dream debut, that's probably up there. Couldn't have asked for a better debut. I mean, this would be ideal. I think I wrote about this. There was an interest from Rangers way back in December last year, and obviously he spoke about that. There was obviously a move almost came about in January. Rangers decided to go another way. I don't think they could get the finances agreed with IK Athens, so they went after Tuur Romans instead. And obviously, he had a terrific sort of introduction last season. Hasn't quite been at it this year. I don't think MD in the team has played well, but it's been noticeable that he's been off his level so far this season, and obviously picks up that groin injury, which really made the signings of Penrice a necessity. And the indications are that Tuur Romans, if he on current form, he's going to struggle to get back in the team. I mean, I know it's only one game, but Penrice was doing everything that he wasn't this season. He was diving into tackles, he was charging forward, he was playing with a real intensity. What I liked about him, you saw it from the assist he got for Gisama just after half time, was that desire just to pass the ball forward quick and early, and it just helped Rangers get on the front foot. It's the times Rangers passing, especially last season, definitely last season, but it's been so pedestrian at times. Penrice's first instinct, Penrice's instinct is just to get on the ball and play forward quick, and you saw it. There was a couple of times in the second half where it released Gisama. I think you saw Gisama really benefit from having that down his side. He was getting into position. He was opened up into space so early, so quick, and it really benefited him. You saw that with the goal. And then even what I liked about Penrice with the goal he scored himself, obviously it comes from a bit of a scramble in the box, ball bouncing about, but he wasn't on his heels. He was on the move the whole time. He was looking for space, and he gets the reward when the ball drops him and he finishes it off well. So listen, things at Ibrox have been so doom and gloom for so long, but especially the last sort of fortnight, 3 weeks. They needed somebody to come in and give them a wee bit of excitement, a wee bit of enthusiasm again, and I think that's what James Penrice did. You can tell, obviously, a huge Rangers fan, growing up in a big Rangers family. He scored his goal. He was giving it the big one to the crowd. He enjoyed his moment. He had a wee nervous wait. Well, it was checked over forensically, it must be said, by VAR. I think they were desperate to see if they could find something to chalk off. I think that's what Rangers fans are frustrated at how long the VAR spent checking out the Rangers goals at the weekend. But when the goal finally get given, he gave a huge roar to the Govan stand. So you can tell this move means a lot to him. He'll be determined to make the best of it. He's another boyhood Rangers fan. They've obviously signed a few of them this season. And if that gives him any extra edge or any extra motivation, then the much the better for Rangers, because they really need every little ounce of help they can get right now.
Yeah, of course, and get to see a Scottish lad getting that left back slot as well, seeing Scottish players doing well. Not ending on a high, looking at one player who's been drawing quite a bit of criticism from the Rangers support, despite what we'd say quite a good, looked like a coup, despite it, considering the number that he was brought in for, Fernandes. It's been an interesting one from him this season, hasn't it?
Yeah, he's had a nightmare so far, hasn't he? He was at fault for the goal at Tannadice on opening night. Had a bad slip in the game away to Ballystock. I think it was great for either goal. Sorry, the Poles scored over there. Poor again against Hibs. Really struggled, really nervous at times. And again here against St Mirren at the weekend, just looked so out of sorts. When he broke into the team last year, obviously after the difficult start that Russell Martin had, he never really played the first few months of the season. It was only really an injury crisis that sort of gave him his shot at playing regularly, and he took it, and he looked like a guy who, a bit like the way this season has gone, that he was a guy coming in with something to prove, and with the rest of the team were feeling a bit down in the dumps. He was a guy who had a wee bit of freshness about him, and that really allowed him to sort of shine. And it was a real breakout season for him. He obviously performed really well, and by the end of it, there's talk of moves to Germany, and I think Leverkusen were interested in him. A few other big clubs keeping tabs on him. But for whatever reason, this season he's not hit those levels at all. I don't know if the talk has went to his mind, or if he's just I think maybe just lacking a bit of confidence is probably more accurate. I think for me, it looks like a guy who could definitely do with a wee shot in the bench. I mean, I don't know. For me, I don't know if the lack of competition right now, obviously with Ben Godfrey being out, and basically being him and Fernandes and McCann as the Rangers' only sort of recognised centre back pairing, centre back options. If just he's finding it, he's been able to coast a wee bit. I think obviously Ben Godfrey looks like he'll be coming back for the second leg of next week's Conference League tie against Jablonec. I would expect it. Ben Godfrey's fit. I expect him to come straight back in, play alongside McCann, because right now Manny Fernandes is nowhere near at it. Fault for the penalty decision that went against Rangers. Obviously, he was bailed out by Ivor Pandur's save, but just so lacking assertiveness in a way that that was the one thing you really praised him for last season. Listen, he's admitted himself issues with focus, but I don't think that should be an issue this season, because Rangers have been at times really open, and there's been enough coming at him that should mean that he maintains it. It's not like it spells last season where Rangers, when they were growing in confidence, they didn't have a lot to deal with at the back. It'd be the odd moment that would catch him out. Rangers have been under the cosh at times this season, so you think he should be absolutely switched on, but no, again, even at the weekend there, just guilty of taking his eye off the ball and paid the price. Lucky that the penalty was saved, and at that point the game was pretty much won. But I think for him, this game against Jablonec on Thursday night, he has to perform. He has to show Derek McInnes that he can be trusted, because if he doesn't, I think Ben Godfrey comes straight back into the team. Yeah,
of course. And looking at that, the performance at the weekend, was that a turning point for Rangers, or is it one swallow doesn't make a summer? Because obviously you're blowing it in the Conference League. Rangers have got to look at that and think, when you look at the teams that are going so far in that competition, it's there for the taking, surely.
Yeah, listen, it's a big game. Rangers going to, not making group stage football would be unthinkable especially when you consider where they were a few years ago, reaching Europa League finals and that. And financially, it would be a huge hit as well. But listen, in terms of Sunday, was it a turning point? Maybe. We don't know yet. I mean, what we can say is that this team is still, even when they conceded the goal to go 2-1, for the first half an hour they had been so dominant, so on top. They looked like finally Derek McInnes was seeing the kind of performance he was looking for. And then for 15 minutes after conceding, all it took was one mistake and they were rattled. Obviously, they got in at half time, they managed to regroup and came out and got a couple of quick goals to sort of put the game to bed. But Rangers, Derek McInnes is entirely right. Rangers can't be so vulnerable and so be knocked off their stride so easily just by one moment, one instant. They have to be far more resolute. I think getting added more quality at the top end of the pitch will help that. They'll feel more confident about themselves. But right now, this is still a team that can be got at and can be rattled. And unless they get the better operators at the top end of the pitch, I think that will continue to be the case.
Well, only time will tell for Derek McInnes and co. But thank you very much, Andy, for joining us.
Cheers, Angus, pal. Thank you.
And just like that, we come to the end of our Hotline Live for today. Thanks to Ryan and Andy for joining me today on today's episodes. And of course, to our listeners and our viewers, and of course, to our sponsors, NordVPN as well. Can't forget them. Keep your comments coming in. We want to know your thoughts on, obviously, Celtic versus LASK, Motherwell as they host Freiburg, Hibs as they travel to Ghent, Hearts versus Rapid Vienna, and of course, Rangers versus Jablonec. We've got so much European football and we want to know your thoughts. So keep your comments coming in. We'll return to preview tomorrow's match tomorrow. But from there, thank you very much and we'll see you next time. Cheers.